What's up, y'all? It's Raymond from Cold Rice Media. It is May. It is Mental Health Awareness Month. It is also AAPI Month. So today I bring on Miss Rita Phetmixay from Healing Out Lao'd.org. Let's go.
Cold Rice Media.
Hey, everyone. What's going on? This is Raymond again from Cold Rice Media. What's Good podcast. I got someone to my left who's already smiling. She's very excited what's going on. Healing Out Lao'd founder Rita Phetmixay. I'm gonna go ahead. I don't want to butcher anything as far as her past and what her credentials are and what we're even gonna be talking about today. But go ahead and take it. I know you can. I know you're good with mics.
Good mics. I know I have my imaginary one right here. What's up, ID, everybody? I'm Rita. Thank you so much, Raymond, for having me on Cold Rice Media. It's such an honor. I just get so excited meeting other creators and people who want to forward our culture, our movement, whatever that means. And so for me, I come into this space as a first and foremost daughter of refugees. I think that's one of my main identities and social experiences that I navigate the world in. But if you're looking for my credentials, I do have a master's in Asian American Studies. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker, which means that I do private practice. I can do private practice. I do private practice when it comes to psychotherapy. So that's like part of my professional role. But my main thing that I like to instill is that, I am the founder, creator of Healing Out Lao'd, which has started off as a podcast to become this whole consulting platform that provides workshops, trainings, consultation to API, Lao, Southeast Asian, overall API movement leaders, how to build capacity to do the work that you do when it comes to equity, justice, awareness, and building emotional resilience in a lot of the work that we do in healing. Essentially healing. I mean, that's why it's called Healing Out Lao'd. So I'm originally from North Carolina. Again, I will always rep the South, even though, South has a really negative connotation. There are Asian folks in the South. There's Lao people in the South. Okay. So
A lot. It's
a lot.
thick down here.
The South is pretty expensive. It's so funny because, like a side derivative, a lot of people don't think that North Carolina is in the South. It's so interesting. I don't know if it's just because it's North Carolina, but I'm like, nah, North Carolina was like the first colonial state. That's the South. So it's it's southern as you can get, and then there's South Carolina, of course. But so growing up in the South, I think that it has shaped a lot of how I experienced the world, and growing up in a predominantly white community. And then it wasn't until 2013 that I moved to LA, and got inculcated in a Asian utopia, basically. And so I've been navigating both worlds, but having those experiences have really shaped the way that I do the work that I do when it comes to healing and mental health in Lao and Southeast Asian diaspora communities.
What initially triggered that, though? I mean, I've always been with diaspora itself. That's always been one of the main things that made me curious about people's just their origins and how you even decide to come here. A lot of it is kind of just more, not necessarily forced, but it was just more pre-written for them beforehand, just because of either a lottery or some what do you call sponsorships and everything like that. But that's a totally different one, right? And I love your work and understanding the diaspora and talking about that. But with regards to you, like you said, it's like my background is, and my interest in this particular field is because of the locations where I'm at. But that there's got to be something there as a younger person growing up. It's like, you know what, that's gonna be it. I'm gonna get in people's heads, or I'm gonna try to understand and try to understand myself also. I don't know. Maybe I'm
all right. We can't psychoanalyze here. Trying to have a session. No, it's not ethical.
No. But how does that? At what age? Was there a moment in time to where it's
no? This is all fall in my lap. I don't think there's ever a trajectory. But you know what? I think there's something about me and my personality growing up, and it being low key, high key repressed. Growing up in a militant family, I'll tell you, my
Mm.
dad is hella militant. He survived guerrilla warfare. He wasn't just, someone who um took the violence. He was part of the violence too
Mhm.
when it comes
Mhm.
to, fighting and really defending, the royal side in Laos. And so, and then becoming a refugee, meeting my mom, and then both of them coming to the States, taking refuge, landing in NorCal. So I was actually born in NorCal, but my dad, he saw so much violence happening within our communities, drug violence, gun violence, drug abuse, substance abuse. So all of that. And he was like, this isn't a place I'm,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
okay to raise children. It's just too violent. So he picked us up and he explored different places, on the East Coast, found North Carolina, he explored like Ohio, Georgia, Virginia, all these different places, and was like, North Carolina is the best place to raise children. And then we all like were raised there. So if you think about like the origin of like even, a family, that it was because, my dad had it set out for us to, be in a place where, again, we're not like thinking about our physical safety, because he's, you already escaped that. Why would I
Mhm.
go
Mhm.
back into another gun zone? And so, you know, with that came the trade-off of racism, And so having that experience, you know, having also my parents in survival mode and them not understanding how to navigate. I mean, just think of like us. If we were plopped in, and if war was happening here, I mean, it's different, however you
Mhm.
define
Mhm.
war. And we were like, okay, like go now, you're gonna get placed to, Poland. Either decide Poland or Germany or I don't know, Antarctica. And so
Iceland, Norway. I mean,
yeah, also Norway, like, it's thinking about that, like,
yeah,
that's what happened
yeah.
to our parents. It's like, "Hey, like, you're getting displaced because it's too violent here. Like, how are we going to survive? Like,
Mhm.
you're being placed with a different language, a different system, people who don't look like you."
Mhm.
My
Mhm.
mom was, like, super like, when I was, like, interviewing her for my film, I made a short documentary film, and she was like,
Oh.
"I was scared."
You
Like,
interviewed your mom, you said, right?
yeah, yeah, I made a short documentary film. It's actually focused on my dad's story,
Mhm.
but I was able to incorporate my mom's story too, because she's like, obviously a huge part of,
Oh,
supporting
yeah.
my
Oh,
dad.
yeah.
And he was the breadwinner, but obviously she, had her own role and the importance of it, of being, a wife and mom. But it was so like sad to
Mhm.
hear
Oh,
her,
yeah.
go through those memories of how she wanted to go back to Thailand. She's from Ubon, Thailand, and she was just like, I like kind of like regretted, taking that chance with your dad. But it was
Mm.
just like, every day she has to think about that. But obviously she's accepted it by now because she's our mom. But yeah, so I just want folks to understand that context of
Yeah.
like, what would you
Yeah.
do in that position if you were displaced by war? And you were kind of told like, okay, let's go to this random country. People don't look like you. They don't eat the same foods as you. You don't know the law. You don't know the language.
Mhm.
You're literally in a foreign ass land. Like you're like considered an alien, at that point, because
Yeah.
people look at you and they're like, "Who are you?" We were even misidentified as Mexican.
Yeah.
Our neighbors in North Carolina, they never, like, experienced refugees before, but there's a huge Mexican population that was growing in North Carolina at that time, so they mistaken us as Mexican because they didn't know anything else. But
So
anyways, to
this
and
was
I'm
this
like,
was around, like, late '70s, early '80s, is that what it was? At least with North Carolina?
no, no, no. So
Mid?
my parents were, like, 3rd wave of refugees. My dad wanted to continue to fight. He coulda came
Mhm.
earlier, like,
Mhm.
in, like, I think like the 70s, maybe he could have came during that time, but he didn't come till like 87.
Mm.
So again, and then all of us weren't born till like 89, me 91, brother 93. And then my baby brother, he was born in like 2003. He was the only one born in North Carolina. But even to so all of this kind of shapes the way that I even, have come into what I do because of, just
Yeah.
experience of a lot of grief, of like of not knowing how to navigate, and my parents
Mhm.
having to mask their feelings and not knowing how to hold space because they are scared
Yeah.
shitless too, at the same time, like, super determined. My dad was super resilient and really had to hold the fort and really, had to make sure and lead, like, literally lead the family into, like, financial security, safety, and all that stuff. So he had to make the final call because he's also the one who's, like, bringing my mom along, and she has no clue what's happening. So, and then I had 3 brothers, right? Raised with 3 brothers. So think about even, like, the gender aspect of this, race and ethnicity when it comes to being raised in the South,
Yeah.
on top of, like, things that happen in the family household that, we don't talk about often in terms of, when we think about, like, conflict and how it can resort to domestic violence.
Mhm.
And it's just layers to the story
There's so
that
many.
then I repressed because you don't have that language growing up. And you also don't, because you're so new in the country. So being second gen or first to be born in the States, you won't have people to look up to, like, you don't have, like, 5 generations and you're like, "Oh yeah, my ancestors, like, settled here and built a life and we have generational wealth." We don't have that. So,
Mhm.
and we then on top of that, we don't see ourselves on mainstream media. We can't look ourselves up growing up, on Google. And
Mhm.
I don't know if Google was even the main search engine back
No,
then.
not even. It was still just AOL and
Yeah.
yeah, that particular yeah,
So,
they barely, you know
so many layers to
yeah.
that kind of, like, then made me, just question a lot, but, also if you think about sense of belonging, and mental health, it was like it wasn't about, well, when we were trying to find sense of belonging, we were actually fitting in, and there's a difference because fitting in is about leaving a part of yourself out so that you can assimilate to the whole.
Yes, yeah,
Versus sense of belonging is really being accepted for who you are and your diversity and the differences that you bring.
yeah. I can't even imagine, at least with your dad and the first how much time did you guys, spend in Cali?
I think until 96.
I said that was about
I
8
think,
years?
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
So,
yeah.
after just in that, like you said, it's basically, I guess you consider it utopia, but during the '80s itself, there's a lot of gangs, there's a lot of violence, like Ed
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
and that wasn't just the right place, and
Mhm.
just that whole process of assimilation, I think that's one of the main things that's one of the best traits, in my opinion, with a lot of the Asian, nationalities and ethnicities, that we can assimilate to a certain extent, but at the same time, keep our core culture as far as and our beliefs and everything, right? But once now that you mentioned that move over to North Carolina, to where how do you at that point then assimilate into a an environment, into a culture that, number one, doesn't recognize you as, as their own, or even like as an equal,
Mhm.
or someone so foreign. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't blame them. It's a lot of the ignorance and everything like that, because you're not exposed to that. I mean, the only probably but you had mentioned Mexican, but at the same time, it's like it might just be like, oh, they're Asians, or probably Chinese or Japanese, because that's the only thing that they know.
Mhm.
But at that point,
Mhm.
how do you as a father, from like coming from conflict, coming from like that type of a like a high manly and aggressive mindset from back home, because he still wanted to fight, and finally you come over
Yeah.
here and you want to make it all
Yeah.
peaceful, and you see that in this society, in that particular culture, in North Carolina. It's like, is that did you find anything threatening in that, or you would just kind of be like, you know what, we're just going to stay on in our own? And how and in saying
Mhm.
that, how did your
Mhm.
dad deal with that, and how did your mom and your dad deal
Mhm.
with that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Like, how did they overcome a lot
Hmm.
of the differences that
Yeah,
we
or
came
just
into?
even the
Yeah,
looks.
because
The-
dad, he could have chose, like, being in a Lao centered community, but I think there was also a lot of grief when you think about the breakage of war in Laos.
mhm,
It can be considered a civil war, which means fighting against the
mhm.
same people of the same ethnicity, or there's many, there's over 160 ethnicities in Laos. But think about within the
Is that
nation
right?
state that there's a rural side and communist side. So when get dispersed, and typically, the people that are against the new government were the ones who were displaced. But there's a lot of mistrust. So how can I trust my fellow comrade who I can't even trust in Laos?
Yeah.
So I don't know
Yeah.
what side that they're on until I, get to know them, talk to them. So I think there's also that fear of being backstabbed and betrayal. And again, this is from my own observation,
Okay.
not their particular words, but just from my observation of my family. And my dad wanted to be close, but not too close to the Lao folks.
Mm.
But in that sense, when we were building community, I think in terms of assimilation, one thing I wanted to note about assimilation was that there's actual a U.S. policy or law or something that took place that actually dispersed refugees. So we actually had no choice but to assimilate.
Yeah.
So that law is actually, we think about assimilation, it's actually pretty violent. When you think about like losing of culture, losing of language in order to become part of a bigger whole. So it doesn't really
Yeah.
value diversity, right? So my family, I would say one thing that I've learned so much and I appreciate what my parents taught me was how to build community from scratch.
Mhm.
And, even though and I don't know if any of my, folks from church back in the day are gonna hear this, but we would go to church to build community, even though we went like, my dad was like, "Yeah, I don't believe in
That's the
Jesus."
only place. That's
Right. I don't believe in Jesus, but I'm gonna go to church so that they're gonna know who I am and they're gonna build trust with me. Yeah. But in a way
so
that's gonna
smart.
help us, obviously it's an exchange, it's reciprocity. It's not about transactions. We were very much, friends of, the people that went to church with. That was one way, right? We built community with people that didn't look like us. But we also went to the temple. So we would, go do some of the
Mhm.
rituals and
Mhm.
ceremonies. And we would do both. So we go to church, we go to temple. So
Yeah.
and my dad never really forced us to believe in any specific religion, but even though he's like really spiritual. But I would say that was what was so helpful.
Yeah.
And my dad just naturally knew a lot of people from Laos too. He had like a lot of different types of sponsors, friends who came here before because he was again third wave. So folks from the first wave and the second wave. And so just by virtue of like him surviving, he needed to talk to people and
Yeah.
to have people help him and ask for help. So he already knew a lot of people here. My mom didn't know anybody. So her
Right.
community was with my dad. So she really had to lean on him a lot in order to survive. And they really need to lean on each other, right?
Yeah.
But I would say that, a huge part of the simulation piece was also just, you know, building community and learning how to have people trust us because they didn't know who we were. So of course there's a lot of ignorance, there's a lot of fear in what you
Mhm.
don't know. So my dad was very strategic and like, hey, like, you're gonna know about my story. You're gonna know that I
Yeah.
came from
Yeah.
war. So
Yeah. And I've heard that in other conversations to where as a trait, as a like the chameleon trait, as you're allowing yourself to be in particular groups and everything, and just being able to fit right in, assimilate right in within those groups. But then one of the other things that I hear about that as a fault, or maybe a toxicity in that situation for yourself, is that you start losing your own self identity, mainly just because you're creating so many different things, right? And within
mhm,
those communities, all of a sudden you're
mhm.
attending, like you said, a Catholic church, Christian church, and everything, but at the same time, you're still at the temple. You start kind of going away from your initial identity as self. But I think in this particular situation, you are then as a refugee in a brand new country, totally different beliefs, and just a melting pot of everything. You're recreating or creating a new identity for you as a family. And I think super kudos to your dad like that. What a way to sit there and be like, here's the plan. He just regrouped.
Yeah,
He was like, here's how we do
that's
this.
actually what I
Here's right. He sat there.
what I
Okay, here's what
show
we're
in
gonna
the
do.
the
You're gonna
document.
like baseball. You're
Yeah.
gonna do
You
like
know
what's the
what? He
baseball?
did have a plan. I'm telling you. In the
That's
documentary, they even
amazing.
highlight he's like, "Once I land, we need to learn English, that's number 1, like, because we're not going to know
Uh-huh.
shit
Uh-huh.
or how to apply for a job. We
Yeah.
need to, get a job after learning English, and after that, we need to focus on our children
Yeah.
because it's not about my life anymore, it's my children's life." So,
What a
my
great guy.
dad was I'm telling you, he's, like, a very strategic man.
And it's also, I would probably say that's not even like, I wouldn't even call them non-traditional, maybe mainly because there are some people from, all these other Asian countries, even Philippines, Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, and everything, right? That there
Mhm.
are like I want to say there's a big group that are traditional in other ways to where they stick to their own. We're not going to really assimilate as much in this particular thing. We're just going to just be as a family or as like a within part of the temples and everything like that. But then
Mhm.
you have those particular one-offs, and I think I would consider your dad as a one-off to be more strategic in his next move, because it's got to be worth it. If
Always.
you're gonna take your
Always.
whole family and
Yeah.
lift yourself to another like tens of thousands of miles away to this brand new foreign land that you know is
Yeah.
going to be a melting pot, strategize.
Mhm.
That's insane. So I actually want to take one quick step back with yourself.
Mhm.
The selflessness of setting yourself okay, and within when you're growing up and you're seeing everything, within your family and just how everything's treated, and you also have your daily with your education, with your just being, as this young woman growing up in this country and taking care of your own personal, it's just personal things that you want to accomplish, to take one huge step back and spend that mindset of, it's like, you know what, I'm going to try to understand and really go into my parents' mindset, where they're from, understand them as the human being before they even came here, and that struggle that they had to deal with here. A lot of people don't. A lot of like us Asians, like first generation Asians, as kids coming over here, we're too caught up in our own personal feelings of actually, I don't want to call it victim, but just like at the same time feeling that trueness of, man, I got to do my own thing, and they don't understand anything without really understanding what the parents really go through. It's
Yeah.
one thing to say is like, well, yeah, I understand that they came from a war-torn country and they have to go over here. But why don't you just drill down into that a little bit? There's a lot of folks that
Mhm.
a lot of us that will actually just kind of be like, yeah, but I got my own life too. Yourself, you
Mhm.
actually got to the point to where I want to understand them, and I'm going to make this my career
Yeah.
to understand others and share and
Mhm.
build off that understanding.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're there now, and one of the
Mhm.
main things that you talk about in your in your pods, and also, I mean, your guest speakers and many other places I've seen the few events that you've actually been out there. One of the things that you talked about was intergenerational trauma.
Yeah.
I'm more like generational trauma. Can you kind of unpack in like what you mean by intergenerational trauma?
Mhm. Yeah. Intergenerational trauma takes into historical context of what has happened in between generations, what violence, what harm,
Hmm.
what oppression has taken place, where one generation may not have the tools or the skills or the privilege to even access healing. So the next generation takes on the responsibility of healing whatever trauma that may be. And that could
Hmm.
be,
Hmm.
trauma from displacement, trauma from poverty, trauma from domestic violence, interpersonal violence.
Hmm.
And so when I think about like our Lao diaspora and how we have had a breakage and displacement, the secret civil war that, where we became the most bombed country in the world per capita, and
Hmm.
a lot of us not knowing that, and our parents being displaced because of different political ideologies, and then going to a foreign place and then starting anew, starting from scratch, and then not having the emotional capacity to really be there for their children. Yeah. And so when we suffer
Hmm.
from poverty, and there's a lot of conversations about, talks about money and how, money has been transactional in Laos, or, our relatives in Laos see American Lao as, like a um like basically like tree, like, money grows on trees on us or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, like the
And
inherent obligations.
yeah, and then obligations. So I think about like, that as an extent of generational trauma,
Mhm,
because our resources have been depleted by whatever oppressive forces that there have been, whether, it's been imperialism, it has been like Tai Sayam, or it has been, just people taking from Lao people that,
mhm,
you know, over time, we think about like our parents and them trying to survive and start fresh here, children get emotionally neglected. Yeah. And
Oh
so
yeah.
their sense of self is pretty much like, I have no sense of self. I don't know who I am. And
Hmm.
so I may overcompensate, and then it uh, revolves into the form of people pleasing. Yeah. In order to be validated, I need to do something. In order to be validated, I need to have a lot of money. I need to have external achievements. So when I think about my story, and that's like a prime example of how I have been, like, dealt with the responsibility now of
Hmm.
healing that generational trauma and really breaking patterns. Like, I'm talking about behavioral patterns that I've
Hmm.
noticed, either from like a very like militant father, aggressive, and very convicted, which it's not necessarily a negative thing, but just these things you notice in the behavior that you're seeing. And then my codependent mom. Yeah. So I'm,
Hmm.
taking
Hmm.
traits of both, and I'm noticing, okay, what do I want to take on that's actually intergenerational wisdom? Because it's also like not only trauma, because we can focus on the negative, we can focus on the harm, but there's a lot of resilience that I've also taken. Intergenerational resilience
Oh yeah.
has been such a huge part of how I also
Absolutely.
navigate life here, that I'm not a victim, right? Like that I
Yeah.
can bounce back, that I have so many resources inside and outside of me. But I also need to also acknowledge what has taken place that has forced me to be resilient. Yeah, the displacement,
Hmm.
the lack
Hmm.
of emotional maturity. Yeah, because things that have taken place that are outside even my parents' control. And then their parents, yeah, and then their parents' parents. So anything that has taken place, and then you realize that, when you get to this point of self-actualization, yeah, like when you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you realize like, oh wow, I finally come to a place where I can shift my behavior because I have this insight. I have this
Hmm.
self-awareness now. And so again, like, this is just my prime example of intergenerational trauma, but there's so many ways to look at it. But I think of it more so on a systemic level. Systemically, what has taken place, what structures have been oppressive
Hmm.
that people have existed in, and then how has that created maladaptive behavior patterns. Maladaptive meaning that it's actually not healthy to
Hmm.
have that behavior, but it's a part of survival. So how have we now healed a survival behavioral pattern into something that feels a little bit more like an adaptive one, that
Yeah.
that actually I'm actually not self-sabotaging now. I'm actually choosing to live and to breathe and to act in a way that is helpful to my mental health, my physical health, spiritual health, etc.
Yeah. I think there's the value in what you put out there, and the way your approach is. I believe is the part where, number one, unpacking the feeling of why you feel that you are a victim of a particular thing, of just whatever toxicity and whatever type of like shortcomings that that
Mhm,
that had come to you
mhm,
throughout your journey, right? But at the same
right,
time, again, the value of where you come from is that also taking a lot of those different traits and a lot of those different things that you feel that was toxic, and weeding out the strengths that actually brought you through that, because there is that. And
mhm,
it's because it's like a lot of the stuff that we might not understand it fully. A lot of the stuff that our parents, the way they treat us, and like you said, your dad was militant. My dad was from the army. He was from the military also, and he's one of those guys,
mm.
very soft spoken, very like not a lot of words, but when he speaks, it's strong, right?
Really
That's
potent,
yeah,
right?
but it's
Like,
like it
what
hits, it
it
hits,
does, it does,
right?
and it strains you up.
And my dad and my mom is like the always yelling, overreactive, but at the same time she's got this the biggest heart when she's
Yeah,
not that, right?
yeah,
So a lot of those things I can always take a look at that and be like, you know what, all that stuff kind of made me messed up, kind of messed me up, this and that. I kind of missed out on those things. But you
mhm,
take those particular things, and like you had said, and throughout all these years of you really understanding your parents and even their grandparents, and really you dissect who they are and how they were when you're their age, then you truly understand what's this person, and why are they this person towards me, and why am I not seeing why are there less apologies in the house, or no apologies from their end if they mess up? Why is it hard for them to say I love you in the household, or they care about me, or even, complimenting me in certain ways. A lot of those things, I felt throughout growing up, because I was the
Mhm.
oldest out of, I was the oldest boy, and you're supposed to be this tough kid, right?
Yeah.
But to kind of mirror how you're looking and how you looked at your parents and how I ended up looking at my parents, I just said, it's like, who are these people and why they act like this? And you've
Yeah.
actually come to that, and that's what you bring forward through
Yeah.
your, through
Absolutely.
your workshops, and
Yeah,
also through,
definitely.
through your pods. I
Mhm.
love that, because a lot, and because I also saw one of the more recent posts that you had on your socials. I believe somebody called you out for, like, being a victim, and
Mhm.
and it was so top layer type of a post and a comment from him, without really even digging deep, and just like, oh,
Mhm.
and because he might have heard some trigger words. It was like, oh yeah.
Mhm.
And then you broke it down at that point. I just love that you have to just approach it and just cover the entire space itself, positives, negatives, and this is what we're going to
Mhm.
do moving forward. So kudos to you.
Thank you. I know, it
Oh,
has a lot of responses even to that
it
video,
really
and it's
I
great.
saw
I
that.
love I
I
encourage
saw that.
community dialogue because we do need to see different perspectives.
Well,
It's
that's
not
what it
just my
is. Yeah.
perspective, but there's always something to unpack.
Mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm. I mean, with even a commenter like that, you don't even like, you almost wanna take a look at what they are, who they are, what they're from, to
Mhm.
try to figure out why that what what overcame you to sit there and literally press the comment and say something like this, because
Yeah.
we're gonna see you. You
And
must
it's
feel a
public
very strong,
at that
yeah,
time,
at
it's
that
public
public, and
information,
we're
so,
gonna remix this
we could
thing.
run with it. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but then that's the thing. It's just more understanding, more addressing, in a very, very mature and forward moving type of an answer. And I appreciate that with you. So tell me what's next for the time being. Tell me what you're gearing up for, and how you are going to be moving forward and sharing your word and sharing your work.
Yes. Thank you for asking. As this year flies by, wow, I can't believe it's almost like in the middle of
It's freaking
2024.
May. It's
It's
freaking
so
May.
wild. So, well, few events that I'm gonna be at, and I hope to see folks there if this podcast is gonna be published by then. But I'll be at Sobriety Fest. We have our first
Mm,
Healing Out Loud live podcast episode on June 16th. And so that's going to be taking place in the afternoon. If you're going to be at Sobriety Fest, I hope that you are able to come and have a very deep conversation about mental health in our communities.
yeah.
So that's going to be one event. Another event is I'll be having a booth and presenting a little bit about Healing Out Loud at the Lao Food Festival in San Diego on June 22nd. And that's also going to be the weekend of World Refugee Day. So it's going to be, yeah, again, come say hi and get to know me. And, I want to get to know your story as well. And launching season 3 of Healing Out Loud. So
Wow.
that's going to be in the works pretty soon. And I already have a lot of episodes that have been batched, but, still curating some of the content for what
Hmm.
that's going to
Hmm.
look like for next season. And working on a future retreat. So we have had 2 very successful, intimate healing retreats for and by the Lao Diaspora women and femmes. So
Hmm.
to have another one sometime next year, early next year. So stay tuned for that as well. And then, of course, workshops and trainings. That's always a by request type of deal. So if you are interested in having
Yeah.
a workshop training for your organization, please, yeah, hit me up and let me know the deets and we'll work something out. But those are a few of the upcoming projects for Healing Out Loud.
Awesome, awesome. I highly recommend it. I'm still catching up on the previous stuff that you've done, because I mean, again, being Mental Health Awareness Month. It is so important to not to basically learn as much as you can about yourself and how you can better yourself, and also like just even previous in the way you approach it with regards to family and back in the homeland, wherever you came from, and everything like that. Understanding the roots of where just those teachings and that type of just how the family worked through that. I think there's so much
Mhm.
value in that, negatively and positively. and it's definitely our responsibility for this next generation to not lose those particular traits, but understand where they really came from and how to better ourselves from them. And that's definitely what I'm hearing from what you how you approach it, and also these, especially with these workshops. Hopefully, I envy that, because I think there's a lot of value in the men and getting together. I just don't, if I was to put something like that, I wouldn't want to just have like just the men come together and be like, hey, let's just take shots and, have a few, let's take shots and just kick it and just get away from the wives, or the significant others,
Mhm.
or the family.
Yeah.
There really should be, it's I don't know if there's any programs like that where really there is that type of focus, but I very much envy and
Oh,
congratulate you in
thank
your methods,
you.
right? No,
I
that's
mean,
dope.
that's something that I've been actually in conversations with different community members about having a men's focused retreat for Lao or Southeast Asian.
Mm,
And for me, it would be creating that with a male co-facilitator.
that's
So yeah,
that's
I
so dope.
definitely am looking out for one. So if you are one,
We could
whoever,
talk about that. I'm
um,
very interested in that. It'd be an interesting platform. It'd be an interesting retreat, just because
yeah.
that's guys
I know,
over here.
and I think men need a lot of love, need a lot of support. There's a lot of demonization, I think, which
Hmm.
creates more violence and fractures in relationship. I mean, and I'm not, I feel like not one that I haven't had, like ill feelings towards men before. I'm not the one to not have those. So that's a part of me that I've also been trying to heal, my relationship with my family, dad, brothers. And so I think those conversations are important to have.
Yeah.
But also I think men need to be in conversation with each other. Because typically, yeah, like men are told to bottle up their feelings to tell themselves that they don't have feelings. And so those feelings need to go somewhere and
Yeah.
they usually come out in aggression. So it's so important that men do have a space to heal and to thrive. I think there is an organization for API men in terms of healing. I think it's called Man Forward.
Hmm.
Uh, and they have been doing a really great work and holding community circles for API men. But I think it. I would love to have a co-facilitator to be able to hold space to really talk about things that uh, is impacting men and
Yeah.
that specific identity, because it's going to be a unique conversation because with women being together, we also have particular conversations that
Hmm.
impact us,
Hmm.
and we need a safe space to have our perspectives being honored. And then, being in a co-head, that's going to have a different dynamic. So I think like every type of uh, social identity group is going to have like a very unique impact towards each other. So yeah, I'm going to manifest that.
Yeah.
For
We've barely even touched the tip of the iceberg on this thing, but I'll save that for future shows. Possible future shows, possible future live stuff that's going on. But Rita, thank you so much. Congratulations on what's next. Congratulations on what you've accomplished so far. Good luck next month, Sabati Fest. You all check her out, Sabati Fest. It's not going to be easy. She's going to be, I don't know if she's going to be by herself up there on that stage, but there's going to be thousands of people that she's going to be looking at as a podcaster.
oh my
Talking
gosh,
about, it's like, how tough is that? But yo, y'all support her. Let her know that you're there for her, and hey, I love what you're doing. I really do love
come
what you're
through,
doing.
fam. We all got healing out loud. So thank you so much.
Healingoutloud.org.
Yeah.
Healing Out Loud. The podcast is LAOD, not LOUD. LOUD.
You
Okay.
already know,
Okay.
Raymond. Yes.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. We'll go ahead and see you in the next show.